Sometimes a model just doesn't strike your interest. It doesn't get you excited and you don't want to paint it, but you need it in your army because either for the rules or it's a requirement of a unit or a regiment. That's the debacle I'm facing right now, guys. The Chaos Chariot, I hate it. What are we going to do about it? Let's find out. Hi everybody, I'm Wayne. When a model doesn't appeal to you, sometimes you have no other choice other than to proxy it out or build something yourself, 3D print something perhaps. And both of those options jumped out to me with the Chaos Chariot. I really dislike this model so much. I'm sure there is a revised version of it just around the corner perhaps. We're praying that that will be the case, but until then, I need this model for my spearhead to place Slaves to Darkness, but I also want it in my army to complete the cavalry element. We've done the Chaos Knights now. This is the next thing that I need to tackle to progress this project. So let's just jump in and figure it out together, how we can perhaps make this thing a little bit more palatable. Come on, let's get into it. The base of this conversion will be the Stormstrike Chariot. And I did manage to acquire as well the actual 2 riders from the Chaos Chariot. Thanks to Mark over at Murfield Miniatures for sorting me out with these. And with that then, it's on to figuring out what the rest of this project is going to look like. And we're going to start off with one of my Bix boxes. This is my Chaos / Demons / Fantasy bits and pieces. I keep everything separate and I'm just going to have a good rummage through this and see if there's anything that I can kind of pull out. Yeah, I did just pull out a Tyranid there, but for the most part, this is just all fantasy stuff. I've got quite a mix of bits and pieces in here, and I'm hoping that with that Stormstrike Chariot, I'm going to be able to mash up a couple of different elements and put something together. Now, the first thing that really stood out to me is this guy. I've had this for a while. It's a Spellcrow miniature. Now, this would fit absolutely great with what I'm thinking as a Gorbeast proxy. I've never been a fan of those Gorbeast sculpts. They look a little bit derpy. And this fits in with some of the Ogroid elements of the army. Now, it does need a little bit of work, but what I'm thinking is I could have this guy pulling the chariot along. It'd be kind of cool to have him like tethered to it, almost like he's ripping the chariot forward rather than running with it. And perhaps we could get in some type of pig or boar thing to act as the horse proxy, magnetize them and swap them out. Now, I am thinking perhaps I could have something else on the back of the cart, but realistically, I'm probably going to go with those 2 figures that Mark over at Murfield sorted me out with. It ties back to the actual original kit. Right, we better crack on then, and the first thing I'm going to do is just snip out the elements that I'm going to use from the Stormstrike Chariot and get those glued up. Now, I did find a couple of round shields in my bits box. You'll see them over there on the right, and they fit perfectly somewhere. So once we've put this together, we'll have a look at where those just might go. And it was a happy little accident, a full-on Bob Ross moment that I found them. And yeah, it's really going to help us kind of get a different feel to this chariot than it just looking like the standard modified Stormstrike. I want it to look as different as I can without going too in-depth into a really hardcore conversion. But these shields fit absolutely perfectly. They're the exact right size for fitting over the wheels. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just going to build the base of the chariot and go from there. Now, I need to get rid of some of the Stormcast iconography. It's going to get in the way, but we're not going to see really what's behind this if the plan goes as I'm hoping it's going to. And I don't need to be overly neat and tidy here. So just using my hobby clippers and a sanding stick, we're going to get it to a reasonable finish where we can use it to stick other elements to. Now, before we go too far, I need to think about what I'm going to do with the base. As with the other models in this army, the base is going to play quite an important part in how the actual overall model is going to be lit. So I want to just draw out a rough sketch of what that's going to look like on the base that we're going to be using. I might not use everything that I'm putting down here, but it's worth putting a few details in. Sometimes you can have too much detail and sometimes less, well, is certainly more. I want to have a crevice on the base and have that lava glowing element. Now, coming back to this front part of the chariot, I decided to just give it a little bit of an extra smooth on there. I'm going to attach a shield to the main part, but I think it's just a case of finding the right one. Now, I've pulled another few bits out of my bit box at this point, and I may not use them all, but I'm just going to kind of placing them around the chariot. Now, the front part here, as I said, I've got these shields from our Chaos Knights that we did a little while back. Now, I'm thinking I could have a selection of the shields around the front of the chariot, and that would give us a nice base to work from. So I'm just diving back into the bits box and I'm going to pull out a whole wodge of different chaotic shields that I have. Hopefully I'm going to find some in here that will be fit for purpose. I really want to avoid 3D printing with this model if I can at all, but I do have this one shield here that is kind of cool. Now, I do like it, but I don't think it's going to fit in, to be absolutely honest. So back to diving into the bits box and seeing what we can pull out. And I found a couple. These are the ones that I've settled on, and yep, I've still not got away from the 3D printed shield, but we'll see how it goes. Now, how are we going to arrange these? I don't know. I'm literally just playing. I'm going in at this completely blind, but I think I'm starting to see something come together here. It's certainly starting to look like it might be workable and viable. And this one that I've got on there, well, it kind of looks cool in the middle. Still, I'm not convinced that I'm not going to use a 3D printed one though, but eventually I decide probably not the way to go, and I'm going to glue on the shield in the middle, and I've made a decision now. Right, onto the rest of it. The horns on the other shield that I was looking at, now these are going to come in useful later on. I want to attach them, I'm thinking, to the bar that I'm going to have attached to the Ogroid. So I'm going to carefully snip them off and clean them up. And that's going to as well give us some clearance on the shield so it's not interfering with the wheels. Now, which side am I going to put on, left or right? Again, I'm just going to dry fit them. And well, I've gone with it on the right because of the skull on the other shield. It made sense to put them where I have. Okay, let's see how it looks with the rider in there. Now, these guys are a little bit small. They look tiny. And, well, yeah, these shields are perhaps a little bit too big. I should have perhaps tested this out before I glued them on, but I didn't. And that's fine. We can figure out, I guess. But certainly, if we have it as it is now, it's going to be too obscured and the rider's just going to be really lost in it. It doesn't look right at all. So we need to do something to fix that. Let's create a platform, something for them to stand on, a bit of a booster seat, as it were. I'm going to use some plastic card. I'm not going to be too neat and tidy here, to be honest. I want it to look ramshackle, like it's been put together. I don't like the whole overly elaborate, baroque, chaos aesthetic. I don't want to lean into that too much. So having something a little bit more the A-Team style just put together, I think will help. So I cut a rough shape for the base, and I'm just going to cut another couple of pieces of plastic card to act as a riser. I did perhaps at this point regret not measuring things a little bit more accurately, but it does the job, and that's all that matters. It's not going to be too neat, but it is going to be covered up with additional detail anyway if it's going to go the way that I think it is. Not too much, obviously, like we say, but the important part is just to give a little bit more elevation to the base so that that rider's not completely lost inside of the chariot. Okay, so just going to glue that on and using a little bit of plastic cement. That's all I need to do, and I'm just going to carefully put those strips on. I've scored them so that I don't have to put too many bits and pieces on there, and it's going to give me basically the shape that I want. It's just acting as a little platform for the plastic card that we've cut out, and that will hopefully give us the height that we need for little rider with the whip, not to be completely lost inside of it. Let's get dry fitted. And it fits pretty well. It needs a little bit more refinement just to fit in with the overall shape of the chariot, and that's easy enough. It's just a couple of little cuts. Right, let's get this guy in and see how it fits. Perfect. However, dilemma. The second rider looks a little bit lost, so I've put together another platform, and that's going to raise up the rear rider, the passenger I suppose he is, off of the platform a little bit more. So we've basically got this two-tiered approach now, and that's much, much better. A nice increase in height from the rider to this chap at the back. Perfect. And it's starting to look something like a Chaos Chariot. Definitely not the Stormstrike Chariot. Now, let's figure out how we're going to attach it to that Ogroid, and we're going to use those spikes we cut off that shield earlier. Now, this is another part of the Stormstrike Chariot. I think it's the part that connected to the Griff Hounds or whatever those are, and it's going to fit pretty perfectly. It looks like actual wheel guards. I did think about extending it, but nah, it fits pretty much perfectly as it is. And there's this little orby bit in the front, and we can use that as the connection point for our magnets, so we can swap between the Ogroid and the boar if we go down that route. There's no harm in trying it, is there, and getting it in there. So I use my pin vise to drill out a small hole here, and I'm just going to use some bicarbonate of soda and some super glue on the front and the back to permanently set some of the magnets in here. Now, don't forget, whenever you're using magnets, to make sure that the polarity is right on both sides of your connection. That's why I've left the wodge of magnets sticking out here. And once this is in place, I can just clean it up and the job should be a good one. Now, I just need to figure out how to attach this onto the bottom of the chariot. And, well, there's a friction fit that works pretty well, and I think with a little bit of polycement and perhaps a little bit more super glue and bicarbonate of soda, we'll have a really strong permanent connection there. It doesn't need to be anything insanely strong. I mean, it's not going anywhere. It's only a very, very weak magnetic force, but there's no harm in building something to last, is there? And that all seems to be fine now, but we have something of an ugly gap here, and I'm thinking what might fit in is the chaos symbol, perhaps, but I'm not sure. It's still going to leave quite an unsightly gap, and I'm not entirely positive that that's going to work. So what can I put in there? A skull, perhaps? I'm not sure, but let's have a look anyway. Good old Citadel skull pack, and I'm thinking perhaps an orc skull, an often underutilized skull, and, well, yep, that works, doesn't it? People always gravitate towards human skulls for some reason, but I'm really liking how this looks. Right, since we've got the skulls out, I'm just going to decorate the base of this with some more skulls, and yes, I know that these are not technically AOS skulls, they're Gene Stealer Tyrannid skulls, but you know what, I'm not bothered. That mixed with some human skulls, it's going to give us a nice little bit of detail on the back, and perhaps this goat skull thing is on brand for the Slaves to Darkness chaps, and it ties it in with the front of the chariot, what we've got on that middle one. Okay, right, we're getting somewhere. This is starting to look like it's a little bit intentful, but, well, let's get some chain on there, because chain's awesome. Now, I've got a couple of different sizes. I've gone with this medium, I think it's 2mm length, and I'm just going to cut some to a few small lengths, and I'm going to use it to wrap around that pedestal base, just to give it a little bit more interest and to widen some of the gaps, to be absolutely honest. If you don't have some of these needle nose tweezers, I strongly recommend you get some. It makes stuff like this so much easier. And I'm just going to attach it with a little bit of super glue CA adhesive. And I've actually added another little bit of chain just to the back to add a little bit more visual flair. Okay, let's see how it looks now. We're getting somewhere. We'll put the rear rider on, and we're going to put Whippy Guy on. We're going to call him Mr. Whippy. There we go. Right, that's sorted. Let's get on to this Ogroid thing. Now, these big spines on the back, they're going to need to go. So, hobby clippers time, and let's get them cut right off. Shouldn't be a problem. This, I believe, is a resin miniature. So, yep, it is. There we go. Cut straight off, and a nice clean snap. Let's get the other one done. But keep these to the side. We may be able to utilize them later on. They do look kind of cool, and perhaps they would work on the front of the chariot, maybe, but I'm not sure. They may be a little bit too big. Either way, they're good to go in the bits box. We'll figure that out later on. Now, getting this other horn thing off was a little bit more difficult, but with a little bit of force and just finding a weak point in the joint, I managed it. Right, so we've got the yarn's mostly off, but we've got these 2 connection points that we're going to have to remove. And I'm trying to get as close to the model as I can without damaging it. I would like to do the minimum amount of remedial work on this guy, to be absolutely honest. I'm not the best with green stuff, so keeping it as clean as possible makes it easier for me longer term. But I got it where I could get it to, and it wasn't too bad. I cleaned the rest up with my hobby knife, cutting away anything that was too close to the detail. So I am actually going to build some of the harness back up with a little bit of green stuff. And I don't need it to be too neat anyway, because it will be covered with chain, I think. And that's how we're going to attach it, because we've already created that magnetic attachment point. But we don't want it to look really messy either. So giving it a little bit of time, smoothing it out is beneficial. It's not too bad. Right, now onto the end. We want this to be pulling some chain as well. So bye-bye a hammer, and we're just going to cut that off. And again, into the bit box with you, my friend, cutting the bottom of the handle off as well. Right, okay, so we should have something that resembles a hand, and let's get this attached now. It's probably worth pinning this on as well, just for a little bit of extra strength, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Busted out the old WoW stick. I love this thing. I think I did a review of it a while back. This is probably one of the most used tools in my hobby arsenal. And I'm going to use this as well to drill out a few holes on the hands, and I'll be putting some magnets in the feet as well. The reason why I'm going to put the holes in the hands is, well, I'm going to attach some chain once I finish painting it, and that's going to look a little bit more dynamic. Now, as I said, I'm going to pin that hand on for a little bit of added strength. So a paper clip, bit of super glue, cut it off, and job's a good one. Just drilled a hole in the other side of the hand. I'm going to pop that on with a little bit more super glue, and well, I'll probably come back in with a little bit more baking soda as well, just to fill in any gaps there. I could do it with the green stuff, but it's going to be wrapped in chain as well anyway, so nobody's going to see it. Might as well have the added benefit of the baking soda. Right, we've got his hand on, we've got some holes drilled in his arm. I suppose let's get onto the next element then, haven't we, and fix these shoulders up and figure out what we're going to do there. And, well, yeah, I may or may not have forgot to film the green stuffing, but, you know, it's fairly straightforward. I use a mix of green stuff and also milliput, the extra fine, so it's pretty much a 3-to-1 mix, I would say, of green stuff to milliput. The reason I do that is green stuff, though it holds detail well, it's a little bit soft, and adding in that little bit of milliput extra fine gives you a more robust surface that you can drill, sand, and it just makes it a little bit, well, it holds detail a little bit sharper. But, you know, your mileage may vary. That's what I chose to do. I did rebuild the shoulder, and as I said earlier, I rebuilt the harness. You'll be able to see a little bit of it here. Again, it's nothing too fancy. I'm not the greatest with green stuff, and to be honest, I'm not really enjoying this project. So yeah, I'm possibly not spending as much time and attention on it as I should have done. Right. Just need to figure out how long this chain needs to be, and we can attach the magnet to the end of it, and that will give us basically our Ogroid attached to our chariot. It needs a little bit of refining, but functionally, this is where we are, and it's looking alright. I think this is pretty much where I wanted it to be. I'm already liking it better than the stock Chaos Chariot. Okay, so I'm going to call that done. We won't go into doing the bore because it's pretty much a bore with some chain wrapped around it. You don't need to see that. The base, however, let's take a look at it. It's probably worth it because we're going to have to build some more bases later on for some of the character models. So, cork, everybody's favourite thing. This is a mat that I got from IKEA. I buy a wodge of these and I use them all the time. I like the grain of it. It gives me a decent scale, rocky outcrop kind of thing. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut around my base, and I'm just going to use the base as a template, and that's going to give me the amount of cork that I need. And then I can start to cut it as I would the diagram that I've put on top of the actual base, and we can kind of figure out how it's going to look from there. Right, once you've done that, being careful obviously, you can transfer your basing idea to your cork, and that's pretty much what I'm going to do. As I said earlier, sometimes less can be more. So I think I'm going to simplify what I was thinking with the base in the first instance and just have one real crack in the base that the lava stuff is going to be glowing through. And then I did 3D print a lot of basing bits that matched the other basing elements on my army earlier on in the project. So I'm going to bring some of those in and stick them down on the base after the fact and integrate them that way. And that ties this base to the infantry bases as well. We'll have that color obviously, but having some visual elements as well in terms of the debris will help bring us together and have that consistency across all of the bases, whether I hand built them or not. Right, I've got basically what I'm happy with, and I'm just going to start refining the edges, gouging bits out of it just to give it a little bit more interest. Once I've done this, we can think about sticking it down to the actual base. Just take your time here. Try not to have any factory edges showing. You want everything to be kind of roughed up, and that's how you want it. Back to the super glue. This is how I'm going to stick it down. Get the cork on there and put a weight on it for a little while, and after a minute or so, you should be good. Okay then, right. Now, we've got something that looks like a cork Pac-Man. What we're going to do next. I'm going to use a few of these basing bits just to raise the level of where the lava or whatever the glowing pink stuff, the chaotic fluid is going to be. And this has got some bubbles in it. This was a base that I printed out. Using this as the lining to the base, I suppose, is going to give us a little bit of elevation. Now, I'm going to use a basing texture paste. This is AK Interactive's Dark Earth, I think. I've used this on a couple of my other bases inside of the army, so there's going to be some consistency there, but I am going to paint over the entire thing anyway, so anything will do, any type of texture paste, just to tie it into the rest of your basing theme. This takes about 24 hours to properly dry, and it was at this point that I realised I'd actually forgot to put some of the other basing bits on there, so yeah, I'm going to have to come back and do that in a minute once we've figured everything else out. Okay, now, you can see here that the lava part is being done. I did that with UV resin. I just poured some in there and cured that, and we're going to get these basing bits that I mentioned I'd printed out earlier put on here, and I used the same super glue and bicarbonate of soda effect. It looks a little bit crusty at the moment, but once it's painted, I promise you this will look totally different. And just priming it even brings out the actual look of it. It looks much better than it did before I did anything to it. And that said, I think we're pretty much done. All that's left to be done is paint it, and that's going to be done in a manner that we've already covered for our Chaos Warriors. The Ogroids I will come to later in another video, but for now, let's have a look how it looks. So we have it there. What do you think? I'm not 100% sold on it. I'm not going to lie. I think I could have done much better with this. And I think part of that was the fact that I'm just not invested in this project at all. It's one of those things that I've had to force myself to get through, and I think that shows in the end result. But sometimes we have those things that we just have in his army. We don't necessarily like them. You know, you just got to get through it to progress. It's a bump in the road, and it's part of the hobby journey. Not everything is going to be something that you really enjoy doing. I enjoy painting. I enjoy modeling. but there's just something about this specific unit that does nothing for me. Perhaps I've got too many projects on the go and I'm excited about the next thing. I want to get on to painting some of the more elite parts of the army. I don't know. But it's done, and that's the main thing. What do you guys think, though? I'm interested to hear from you. Please interact with me. Tell me what you think. What would you suggest? How could I replace this further down the line? Do I even need to replace it further down the line? Let me know how you cope with this sort of dilemma in your own hobby journeys. Thanks for joining me. If you've made it this far, I do appreciate it. If you've not already, leave me a comment down below. Like the video, subscribe, and do all of that YouTube thing. It helps me grow the channel. If you like to listen to more hobby content, you can find me on the Warhammer and Wings podcast every 2 weeks. Wherever you get your podcasts from, you'll find us, or I'll put a link again down in the description below. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate your time, and yeah, have a good hobby week or fortnight. See you later.